Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of Daily Kos The Brief, our weekly show about politics. I'm Marcos Malitzis. I am here with Carrie Alaveld. And Carrie, I think we're finally at that stage in the cycle that even though it's still summer, every week is jam-packed full of stuff. Like there's so much to talk about. We were before the show, we're trying to narrow it down.
I
'Cause-
know, I know. Yes, we were like we were trying to weed stuff out, and then we ended up putting most of it back in. I
oh,
mean, like the problem is that the Republican Party just offers up every week just a bevy of like insanity, and it's like I was trying to like parse out like what really matters here is always a challenge. So anyway.
yeah, it's definitely not dull, and I suspect it's going to stay this way for pretty much all the way through November. So I think this show's going to be just rocking for the next for the next year, just and plus because there is
Stick
so much
around.
happening. So last week we talked. It was the day before the Republican primary debate, and so we both had our theories, and they ended up being very close alike. We're like, what did the Republican field that's not named Donald Trump, what did
Right.
they need to do to actually make a run at the nomination? And because everybody's been so passive and so like they're afraid to criticize Donald Trump. And Trump was not at the debate, which I think did not serve him well. But
No,
everybody
I don't
else
think so
was.
either.
Everybody else, almost everybody else that was at that debate. A couple of like fringe Republicans didn't qualify, but did you? Um, what we talked. I mean, I think our consensus, Carrie, if I'm not mistaken, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think the consensus was that they needed to this is rocket science, right? They needed to criticize Donald Trump. They needed to create a alternative, create some distance and provide an alternative to Donald Trump, who under indictment X number of times might not prove to be their strongest candidate. Did you see anything in a debate that would suggest that anybody is thinking, yeah, I'm actually going to create some kind of opposition to Donald Trump?
Well, I think the only person who really did that, yeah, I mean, Chris Christie, obviously, Asa Hutchinson. I just don't think either of them have a chance of winning the nomination or even like enough donor support to really go for a long period. But Nikki Haley, former South Carolina governor and UN ambassador, I mean, I do think she was the only one who was like, Trump is not going to, she actually said at one point, he's the most unpopular politician in America. I mean, she's kind of wrong because Chris Christie might be the most unpopular, but
Mitch
he's,
McConnell.
he's
There's
probably,
plenty
yeah,
of Republicans.
there's plenty of Republicans to point to, but Trump, to her point, may be the most polarizing, right? Everyone sort of unanimously dislikes Chris Christie. If you look at civics, like polling of him, his favorables, there, independents, Republicans, Democrats alike don't like him. But Trump is truly polarizing. Nikki Haley was the only one who was willing to go there. She actually at one point tried to do some sort of truth. I don't want to paint her as a hero here, but tried to do some sort of truth telling with Mike Pence about a 15-week abortion ban not being a popular position. He was trying to say it had like 80% support. She was like, you can't lie to the American people about that. It doesn't have 80% support. So she I think she did something, and she needed to do something. She was in danger, I think, heading into that debate of losing enough donor support to continue her candidacy through Iowa. My guess is that the donors are still, a whole bunch of well-heeled Republican donors are still trying to figure out who the heck they can put up against Donald Trump to potentially make this a two-person race and defeat him, which is a long shot at best. But I think she caught some donor eyes during that. And Tim Scott, who went into the debate flush and probably,
Wait,
yeah,
hold on,
sorry.
hold on, hold on. Nikki Haley, I don't want. She also criticized Trump on spending. Talked about the
Oh
deficit,
yeah,
and she attacked her own party, saying that everybody talks about Democratic spending, but if you look at the earmarks, it was I forget her exact numbers, but like 8 billion was from Republicans
well,
and
she
two
said
billion was
that
from Democrats.
under Trump, she said that he added $8 trillion to the deficit, which
So
is
yeah,
true. She
I would say I didn't get the sense that she was overtly attacking Trump. She did, but I think she like what you were talking about. There's a skillful way to do so without, Chris Christie's like a battle hammer,
Yeah.
right? They come in and beat you to a pulp. I thought Haley was more scalpel, and
Oh yeah, totally.
the plus side of that is that it didn't engender that knee jerk gotta defend Trump feeling. I don't think I'm not a Republican, but it was more
Yeah.
subtle. On the downside, it's more subtle, so it's not as quick. It's not as easy to pick up, right? I mean, you have to really be listening to get it. And so, I found that, yeah, I found that actually fascinating. And the one place where she might get beat up by Republicans, which is on the abortion issue, if you looked at the crowd, they didn't care. I mean, one way or the
No.
other, they were tuned out. They were sleeping. They wanted to hear about Hunter Biden. That's what they wanted. They wanted the red meat, like abortion. They won. Like they got what they wanted. They're done. They're ready to move on. And so I think again that issue really plays to our strengths because they're not motivated by it the way we are.
No, no. Yeah.
That's derailed. That's a
She
whole different conversation.
yeah. She was the only person, and she said it like 2 or 3 times, saying, "We can't lie to the American people. We have to be honest with them." And that is just like, I have to say, so there's really 2 primaries going on, and I think most people have figured this out, but it's worth stating that there is the GOP donor primary, right? And then there's the grassroots activist primary. And the Trump has the grassroots MAGA activists. He's got like roughly a third of the Republican Party tied up, roughly, around 35, 36%, somewhere around there, tied up, who are probably never going to leave him, right? And then you've got I'm going to use Whit Ayers numbers here. He's a sort of well-known Republican pollster, has been for a long time, and he's done a lot of polling on the Republican Party. I don't agree with him, on hardly, any policies, but I don't doubt that he has a sense of where the polling stands. And, he's got Trump at about a third of MAGA Republicans. Like, we're talking about the Republican base here. He's got never Trumpers at about 10 to 15%. And then everybody else, which is roughly 50% of the party, is in the probably Trump, maybe Trump category, where they like Trump, but they just might be open to voting for someone else. They might be persuaded that he has too much baggage. And I think a lot of those people have started reverting to Trump because no one, specifically, his number 2 challenger, Ron DeSantis, the Florida governor, has been able to consolidate any sort of base against him. So he just keeps on losing altitude. Even after the debate, he lost altitude. I looked at his numbers, nothing. So in the donor primary, I think Nikki Haley made a lot of headway, and that's important for her because most of these candidates will stay in as long as they have the money. And then I think Tim Scott faded away. Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina, he just sort of faded away into the woodwork. It's partly that it looked like he was running for vice president. I don't know that he thinks that's true, but that's what it looked like. And he didn't have to worry. He's got a lot of money at this point, at least to go through Iowa. So he didn't have to worry about, making sure that he stood out to donors. He might have to start worrying about it now.
The one place where he showed any real passion and energy was on the abortion discussion. And again, the crowd was totally checked out. That doesn't mean Iowa is very evangelical. The Republicans who vote now, I mean, we're up to 60% of the Republican vote in Iowa is male, and everybody there is white.
I know that was fascinating to me. That was on your Meet the Press when you were on Meet the Press. They brought that up that of the Iowa Republican people who participate in the caucus, 60% of them are male. I had no idea. That was news to me.
Yeah, it's crazy, and so that might be a problem for Nikki Haley in Iowa, but they're very heavily evangelical. So maybe Scott can use that issue to at least do well in Iowa. But that crowd at that debate, they were sleeping through it. So his like one grand moment where he actually showed any kind of energy, like nobody cared, which was was really interesting. Like that, it made for incredibly bad performance for him. He literally was like wallpaper.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah. So I think we come out of that debate, and now, and remember, we have another debate September 27th. So that's going to be an interesting. Trump isn't supposed to be at that either. I look. There's a lot of people who think Trump not being at the. You could. I think you can argue it either way. Trump not being at the debate, and he doesn't plan to be, so far as I know, at the second debate either. It's like, why would he even play footsie with these, people who are so far below him in the polling? That said, every time he doesn't show up, he gives an opportunity to someone like Nikki Haley to make a run at the GOP donors, at having the wherewithal to stay in to challenge Trump. And if he was there, I don't think she would have had the moment she had. I have a hard time seeing her standing up to Trump and coming out looking as good as she did. So you can argue that either way, but I think his absence is actually leaving an opening for people to make a play, and Nikki Haley did.
Donald Trump likes to talk about how he's up by 35 points and whatever. And it's true, right? He's up by a lot. But if you look at what the actual numbers are, he's around 50%. Might float up a point or two, might float down a point or two. And everybody else is like at 12%. So he is correct. But the big number there is that half the Republican Party does not want Donald Trump. And so you're absolutely right. He's not on that stage. He's giving somebody the chance to start consolidating support, because I don't know if it's going to happen or not, but there's probably not, but there's a non-zero chance that somebody starts getting traction and starts consolidating that anti-Trump vote. And there's not much that Trump could do about it. In fact, if Trump starts saying Nikki Haley's the person I'm afraid of and starts attacking her, that's just going to send a signal like, okay, that's the one he's afraid of.
Yeah.
So it's a no-win. He ignores her. She can build support. And I'm not saying it could be Scott. It could be anybody, right? Any of that crowd. But if he
just not DeSantis.
Exactly. Oh man. I mean, we all saw it probably, but when asked if he would support Donald Trump if he was a nominee, and the way he looked both left and right before he raised his hand was absolutely so on brand. I couldn't even.
He had to look. It's so sad. He had to look at Vivek. He had to look at Vivek to figure out whether or not he was going to raise his hand. And what did he think Vivek was going to do? Vivek was going to raise his hand. So what was he even looking at? He's such a loser. Oh,
yeah,
bad.
Everybody knew that question was going to be asked. I don't understand. I don't understand why that was hard for him. Either raise your hand or you don't. The end.
God, he glitched.
But
Yeah, it was perfect. We don't need to belabor the point. He's so terrible at everything. It's a lot of fun to talk about. But what's interesting is that you said, roughly 50%, they do like Trump. They're for Trump, but the other 50% are looking for,
it might not even be 50. I mean, you just said you have the polling, right? That Trump has locked down about a third. And then there's that crowd that's like, I like him enough if somebody else stands up. And they were DeSantis curious. We saw polling early before DeSantis jumped in, when he was just an idea, not an actual candidate, that Trump's numbers were down. And so that crowd has gone back to Trump because of the weakness of this primary field and the lack of an obvious alternative. So you have half that the field, even now they're saying like, no, I don't want Trump. And then I still think you have another maybe 10, 15% that is open to the idea of somebody not Trump and would be open to that argument why to avoid Trump. So there's an opening there. I don't understand why somebody's just not driving that freaking truck right into that opening, because it's right there for the taking.
And Trump's aggregate, to your point, has dropped off. So, they kept on the thing is he's been pushing this idea that every time he gets indicted, he gets stronger, right? And that's of course not true in the general election. He gets weaker in the general election, even if he gets stronger among the Republican base. But I think his indictment, his Georgia indictment, was announced by Fulton County DA Fani Willis on August 14th. And you can see he's up at right around, in the aggregate, the 538 aggregate of the primary, he's up right around 55%. And right around mid-August, he starts to go down. And this is the first time we've seen him start to go down sort of since the indictments. And he's now down at right around 49, 0.2 or 0.5, something like that. So he's actually lost about 5 points since he was indicted.
Without anybody really going hard. Nobody credible, right? Like Christie has.
Nobody credible. All of that runoff has not gone to Ron DeSantis. It's gone to Vivek Ramaswamy.
Oh man.
So yeah. You want to say anything about Vivek?
No, he's comedy relief. He's the clown. He's there to make everybody laugh and make it interesting, and I guess he did.
Okay, well, let me just say, I just want people to think about Vivek for a second, because he's definitely.
Yeah, I just say Carrie wrote a freaking fantastic story on Daily Kos. I think you should definitely look it up on why Vivek is actually more dangerous than Trump.
Right. And he said, and the title of it is, Vivek Ramaswamy isn't just Trump's mini-me, he's way worse. And the reason he's way worse is because while he embodies, most of his vision is a MAGA vision for the nation, right? Most of it is isolationist. We're just going to give Ukraine to Putin to end the war there. All this really horrific stuff.
Once again, Taiwan to China,
Taiwan to China, and there are 2 genders and blah, 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 all this stuff. But the one thing he's added that Trump really doesn't have is this really paternalistic religiosity. He has these 10 commandments that he's come up with. And what the first one is, God is real. And the 7th, which he repeated twice in the debate, was the greatest institution known to man is marriage, or something like that. Known to man or known to America as marriage, something like that. So he is just, if you watch him, he's good at being the happy warrior usually, but sometimes you start to see him get angry. He does not like women. Okay. He's very condescending to women. You can tell that, like, Nikki Haley was repulsed by him on stage. And if you see him, I'm going to write this up, I think. If you see him in some of his interviews with female interviewers, he's very condescending. But he has this real paternalistic religiosity that he's bringing in. He's not Christian, to my understanding. I'm pretty sure that he's Hindu. But he has this, but he thrills the Christian base with this idea of, we got to get back to family, and fatherless households are the reason that America is in decline, and blah, 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 and the nuclear family and all that stuff, right? So he's actually adding to the Trump's MAGA agenda, this really sort of misogynistic, patriarchal,
kind of racist
religiosity.
too, because
Racist, yeah.
And you did a good job of tying it into Ronald Reagan's welfare queen, and because it's sort of meshing that Ronald Reagan, ethos, vibe, whatever you want to call it, with MAGA, which is actually, as you say, that's pretty potent stuff. I don't think he's the ideal vehicle for it, because he's kind of a clown, but whoever nails it, it can actually, and he's actually saying, this is the model. Right. And I think DeSantis maybe wanted to go there. He just didn't have the courage to own it the way that Vivek owns it. He owns it, man. I mean, I made this point on Meet the Press, and it literally, that was what they ran with as sort of the headline for the segment. And because I said, can you imagine, like, Vivek, he said, he's got no shame, right? He said that he had never thought about foreign policy until 6 months ago. Like, he just never cared. Yet he sat on stage and he tried to lecture Nikki Haley on foreign policy. And Nikki Haley, of course, was the ambassador to the United Nations. I mean, say what you will about her politics, she knows foreign policy. And for him to sit there and act like she was an idiot was really, and I think it speaks to just how he, maybe is because she was a woman that he would disrespect. Although he disrespected Mike Pence. I mean, I think that was his whole shtick, was to disrespect everybody.
He wanted to be Trump on stage. He wanted to talk over everybody. He wanted to, his whole persona is Trumpian. He was rude to everybody.
So Meet the Press, it was like mansplaining. Vivek mansplains to Nikki Haley was sort of the headline. And but yeah, it's one of the moments that stood out to me. And there's a picture that I wish you guys
Oh
haven't
yeah,
seen
that
it,
picture. Yeah,
where
that
he is
picture.
literally hovering over Nikki Haley with his arms up with the victory sign, like
Yep.
total bro, like inner face, inner space. It's the creepiest, most rudest, most misogynist. Like everything about it is wrong, and it
She
doesn't
and she
surprise
looks
me, I
like
guess.
she's about ready to punch him in the mouth is
My
what she
God,
looks like.
she should
She's
have.
just like, it reminds me a little bit of Hillary Clinton, like holding it together while, Trump was like, stalking her from behind
Yeah,
during the 2016 debate. It was like
yeah,
creeper behind her, and she's trying to answer a question, and all you want to do is turn around and like elbow him in the stomach or worse, and like he, it's so classic. But anyway, I think he is. I don't think he can do it. I just think the sort of ethos and the ideology that he's bringing would make MAGAism even worse than it is,
hmm
and potentially, it is this patriarchal, misogynistic sort of ethos is right in line with authoritarian regimes, right? With fascism. Something
yep.
I brought in the piece too. So
Yeah, excellent piece. I highly recommend that you check it out. The So Donald Trump, though, the big news of the week, we all got to make fun of his supposed height and weight. We got to laugh at his mugshot. But we got big news. I think it was yesterday, or on
yep,
the
that's right.
timeline. We're recording this on Tuesday, August 29th. So the date of his court trial, and you think this is significant?
Oh, I do. Yeah. So, and I thought it was significant. And then it helped to have some Republican operative confirm to me on NPR that it was significant. But so the trial date for now is set for March. And this is in the federal trial, right? This is not the Georgia trial. This is in the federal election conspiracy case that's brought solely against him, where at this point, there are no other people named in that indictment. So that is set for March 4th. And now I think most legal analysts think it could move a little bit, but it almost certainly, I mean, like basically certainly, like 99% certainty going before
Yeah, you cannot
the
appeal a court date.
right before the
Yeah.
election. I mean, you can't appeal it, but his lawyers might be able to say we need a little bit more time to review this or that. Most people think it goes before the end of the month no matter what. Okay, so it goes in March of 2024. And by that time, I mean, even if it held for the 4th, right? Super Tuesday is on March 5th. That means that you've already had Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, and Nevada all go before the court date starts. And it very well could be, unless someone really manages to very quickly whittle this down to a two-person race between him and them, that the race is almost already decided by the time you get to the trial. In which case he would be like sort of the prohibitive front runner and probable nominee even before Super Tuesday and even before the first day of the trial. But it just makes all four of those early states so much more impactful and
Condenses the
definitive.
timeline. Yeah, condenses the timeline. And so if you don't know, Super Tuesday is named Super Tuesday because a lot of states go at the same time. And I don't know what this Republican calendar, what the Republican
It's over
calendar
a
looks like this
dozen.
year.
It's like
But
15 or something on
yeah,
Super
and there's
Tuesday.
a crap ton of delegates. Usually Super Tuesday is worth like, a third of the delegates. It's a big chunk. And it's funny because Iowa, it's like handful of delegates because it's a small state. New Hampshire, tiny number of delegates, totally outsized just because they're first in a calendar. And whoever doesn't do well, the money dries up. I mean, they all want to keep running. They all want to get to Super Tuesday, but once the money goes away, that's that, right? So Super Tuesday is like the last gasp for a real push. And the candidates that go the distance do well on Super Tuesday. Like Hillary Clinton against Barack Obama, she did well on Super Tuesday and made it a race, and that was that, right? That this thing was going to go the
Race to
distance.
the end. Yeah.
And so that's why it's important. So if I mean, it's just the idea that he's sitting in the courtroom on trial when that much of America is voting for him is actually kind of fascinating. Um, we don't see a bump amongst Republicans for his indictments and stuff. I don't know if sitting in a courtroom actually in trial might change the situation, but it does present like a wild card uh, in what is already a very interesting primary.
Mhm. True
So,
enough. True enough.
there's one, I guess, other topic that I'd love to talk about today, and that's Joe Biden. And I was on Meet the Press this weekend, and I was asked if what I thought about should there be more of a Democratic primary. And my response was that according to Civics polling, 80% of Democrats have a favorable opinion of Joe Biden. So if you don't think that there's room for a viable primary in the Republican side, there's even less room on the Democratic side. I'm not kidding you, Carrie. Everybody literally scoffed. You can hear it
Yeah, yeah.
in
You could
the
see the
the
body
show.
language. You could hear it. People were like,
It
mm.
was
I,
derisive, and even after
so
the
just
show,
let's set the scene though. So for the uninitiated who don't watch Meet the Press on Sundays because they have better things to do, right? You're at a round table with like four or five people. You're with the anchor Chuck Todd. You're
Chuck
with
Todd, a
Pat
a fellow
McCrory,
Pat
former
McCrory, who's he's a bathroom anti-trans,
former
guy, former
Republican
governor
governor of North Carolina.
of North Carolina. Some woman from AEI, which they don't explain on the show, but that's American Enterprise Institute. Is a right wing think tank. Uh, Me and Stephanie Murphy, who was a congresswoman from Florida, Democrat, but literally the most conservative Democrat, head of the Blue Dogs, which is the most conservative Democrats. And gotta say that she was agreeing with the other two so much that it was three
It was
conservatives
It
and
was
me.
kind of like you against the conservatives. They like flew
Yeah,
you in so that like
yeah,
all these other
and
people could gang up
I
on
was
you and pick you apart.
I was fine with it. That's not a problem. Put up 10 Republicans against me. I'll take them on. But it was fascinating that they were laughing at the idea that Democrats had favorable opinions of Joe Biden, even though I cited a poll number. And what's funny is that I said 80%. I went and checked later. Civics actually has Biden's approval rating at 82%. And it's not even just our own poll, right? I went and checked Gallup. Gallup has 87% favorable approval rating amongst Democrats for Joe Biden, right? So, but they're in this DC bubble, and the American Enterprise Institute woman then responds with, "At my dinner table, nobody likes Joe Biden," and it's like, oh, like at the conservative woman's conservative family, like what kind
The
of comment
weird
is that?
election denial, pro-life,
And
dinner table of you.
and McCrory, who's Republican, doesn't know anybody who likes Joe Biden. And then
Okay, can
Stephanie
I just say
Murphy,
McCrory, whose entire political career is washed up because he misjudged the bathroom bill that he signed into law and thought it would be
mhm,
super popular, right? He did in his own political career. He lost re-election
yeah.
and tried to resurrect it several times. I mean, most recently where he tried to run for Senate in 2022.
So, and Stephanie Murphy lives in a conservative part of Florida, and of course, people around her don't like Joe Biden, and it's amazing. But it was like they were like reinforcing each other off camera too, not just on camera, but off camera about how they didn't know anybody who loved Joe Biden, and it's like I'm not sitting here with like personal anecdote. I'm actually pointing to data that shows, and
Who's do people at your dinner table like Joe Biden?
people. I gotta say, at my dinner table, nobody likes Donald Trump. So therefore, I'm gonna go on national TV and say that nobody likes Donald Trump because at my table, nobody likes Donald Trump. I don't know about your table, Carrie. Does anybody like Donald Trump at your? I mean, look, we got a great sample size here.
Yeah, my
I mean,
my dinner table, not a whole lot of Trump lovers, and one of them in grade school was asked, "How do you spell jail?" And they said Trump.
the best. That is
Anyway,
the best. but it was absolutely
I mean, they
fascinating.
weren't wrong, to be honest, but I mean, they weren't
And
wrong, right? I mean, it was just reflecting. I was hoping that they were less aware of the national news than that, but it just so happened that they were aware enough to know.
but even after the show was over, that was they all laughed at me that I would argue that that Biden is popular, and I didn't say Biden was popular. I said favorable, and because that's literally what the data shows. So you wrote this piece, Carrie, that one reason that Republicans are feeling more comfortable moving over to Donald Trump is because they have been convinced by Fox News and their media bubble that Joe Biden cannot win re-election, that he's this bumbling fool who is senile and has cognitive decline, and so there's just no way they can lose against Joe Biden, which has given them sort of permission to take electability off the table.
Yeah.
And it's not just MAGA. This is like Stephanie Murphy was in that sort of, a supposed Democrat was in this world where like we're in trouble because nobody likes Joe Biden. I don't see that in the data. Do you?
Yeah, no, no, I don't. I don't. I mean, I look, this is so this reminds me watching that table reminds me so much of what it's like to be in the DC bubble. Okay. Now, there are people what they were arguing was that no one liked Joe Biden. I mean, I
Literally,
think there are
no one.
people who reasonably would have like I would have been supportive of having a primary, but what I'm not supportive of is having someone aggressively go at Biden who has decided to run for reelection. I would have been happy to have Biden say, "Look, I had my term. I did a good job. I'm going to step down now and let the Democratic Party move forward." Mostly because I think we've got such a deep bench of really great people like Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan and Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania and Roy Cooper in North Carolina and maybe even Gavin Newsom in California. I mean, you go on and on. There's so many people. I think I'm just like itching to see where the party goes next, right? But that being said, I like Joe Biden, and Joe Biden has far surpassed my expectations of what he would be
Close.
able to do as a Democrat in charge of a deeply divided nation with in the first 2 years very narrow, extremely narrow majorities in both.
Yeah, no
I mean, it
margin
doesn't
for
get more
no margin. Yeah, no
no
margin.
margin for error. I just can't believe all the historic legislation he managed to get through. And then he came through. I mean, they're still going through the paces on this, but he came through on student debt relief. He came through on any number of things. He did some gun reforms to the extent that he could. He's been much more forward leaning than I thought he would be. I thought he would be such a placeholder president. And frankly, he's gotten far more done than any, president in,
Yeah.
I think, a couple of decades.
Yeah, yeah. No, he's had a better Congress to work with, even with Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema than Barack Obama did, right? Where there was 10 Joe Manchins and Kirsten Sinemas in that caucus. And so and it's they mistake the wish that, I wish our president was Elizabeth Warren. I don't know if she would have beaten Trump. I mean, Biden barely beat Trump.
I mean, you and I
But
both
now,
like Elizabeth Warren.
yeah,
I
but
like it too.
the president has an incredible incumbency advantage. Like incumbent presidents don't lose. Only twice in the last 100+ years has an incumbent president lost,
Trump, go
and
Trump.
Trump being one of them. And it would be political malpractice to surrender that incumbency advantage. I would almost say, like, okay, we want to move forward, then have him run for re-election, and then he can resign right after he's.
I mean, you're much more of a pragmatist where that is. I think I'm somewhat of a pragmatist, but anyway, yeah.
But when people say like, "Oh, I wish it was somebody other than Biden and Trump," it doesn't mean I don't like Donald Trump. I don't like Joe Biden. It means in my brain, I had this idealized, unicorn that agrees with me on everything. Mm-hmm. And so when you talk, I mean, I know No Labels. Pat McCrory is now a co-chair of No Labels. They're talking about fielding a third party challenge because nobody likes Biden and Trump. And their big mistake is that, first of all, a lot of people like Biden, like too many people like Trump, and people like Biden just fine. Do they wish it was Elizabeth Warren, or do they wish it was Mitt Romney, or do they wish it was uh, you know uh, Bernie
Any number of
Sanders?
people,
Yeah. Just throw out names. But this idea that, okay, they like this 65% wish it was somebody else. Okay, yeah, but those 65%, there's about 100 different people that would fit, and there's no one person that can come in, this unicorn. I call it the magical unicorn creature on Meet the Press, and Chuck Todd ran with it. Yeah, it's like, who is this? He asked McCrory, who is this
yeah. What
unicorn
did he say?
that you're going to run? He said, oh, there's lots of people I want to. And they can say, like, who's it going to be? Well, you'll see, there's going to be lots of people. Like, there is nobody. Because the second somebody comes out, then their numbers tank. And there's this great poll by Monmouth University that polled Biden, Trump, and a generic third party. And a generic third party candidate gets like 30%, right? Because again, everybody's like, oh, that's going to be Bernie Sanders. That's going to be whoever
their favorite,
love, right?
Yeah.
The second you slot in Joe Manchin on there, because they were floating Joe Manchin's name earlier, he was at 16%. And like, you wouldn't even get that much.
But the point is that even their magical unicorn candidate, if they got 30%, how do they get more? Right? They can't. Yeah. There's nowhere for them to go to get more, and that's their ideal candidate, right? There's nowhere for them to go to get more. I mean, did McCrory address that at all?
No, because their frame, and I think it's a right wing grift, right? Like Harlan Crow, who's Clarence Thomas's sugar daddy's the funder. It's a grift. He focused two things. He focused on attacking me that they had a 30-point plan. But if you go look at the 30-point plan, it's literally things like, we'll be number one in education. And then you look at the details, it's like the president needs to send a signal that will be number one. Like, I mean, it's a joke, right? It's literally nothing. On abortion, it's a hard issue. There's two sides and we'll find consensus. No, you won't. The consensus was Roe v. Wade. And if you really wanted consensus, you'd say, let's go back to Roe v. Wade.
Frankly, McCrory said during the roundtable, he said, well, Nikki Haley was saying she was basically spouting our platform and she was looking pretty good. And I'm thinking, well, if Nikki Haley's spouting your platform, why do you need another candidate? Right. I mean, then she's your right. She's your person. Like, why are you? And she's running for the Republican nomination. So get behind
Republican.
Her.
Right.
Yeah.
Republican. And when you start looking down the list, it's a lot of Republicans. It's failed conservative or Republican politicians. John Huntsman ran for president in 2012. He got one delegate. You have McCrory, who lost because of the anti-trans bathroom bill. You have Joe Lieberman, who we drummed out of office. He didn't run for re-election because he knew he would lose. And these are all, it's all white men losers. I didn't realize this, but the CEO president of No Labels, she is married to Mark Penn, Mark Penn.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, who did Hillary Clinton a disservice on so many different things. He was her pollster, chief advisor. Really, really, I think, had terrible instincts.
Whenever I see Mark Penn's name on anything, I'm like, I prepare myself to disagree vehemently.
Well, No Labels now qualifies. So he was focused on this 30-point plan. He didn't talk about specifics because there's literally nothing in there that is actually worth pointing to and saying, okay, that's a real proposal. And then his other arguments, just like people want an alternative. In this entire country of 300 million, we can't do better than these two. No, actually, we can't. And maybe in 4 years, when there's an open primary on both sides, maybe, quote, we can do better. But the reality is that they can't have somebody that's going to slot there as a party. If you look at their proposal and who runs it, there's no cohesive vision for why we are a different party. I mean, if you look at like Canada or United Kingdom, where they have three major parties, all three have cohesive visions about what they stand for, and they have their place on the ideological scale. Now, it sucks because in both cases, that third party takes from the left, and it screwed us on many on an election. But at least there's a coherent narrative why that third party exists. This is just as we can do better. Like, okay, we can do better. So what do you actually stand for? But then you look at the details and they don't actually stand for anything because they know that the soonest they take a position, they'll lose half their support overnight.
Right, right. So what do you think? I just want, like, what do you think we do about this? Because the truth is that probably, in a head to head with Trump, Biden most certainly is in a better position to win that than Trump is. But a third party candidacy is could be a real spoiler. And the question is this, like this whole idea, there's RFK out there who's gonna, maybe run third party, but he's only talking to Republicans. He's only on Republican outlets, and supposedly
Yeah, go for it.
he's not. I guess he's trying to run in the Democratic primary. I mean, I'm not scared of him in the primary, by the way.
No,
But
no.
like,
In either way, he's appealing to conservatives at this point.
But
Like,
a third party candidate is truly a potential spoiler. And the question is, what to do about this organization that says it's no labels, that seems entirely funded. I mean, I don't know for sure, but seems primarily funded by Republicans. That has a bunch of Republicans and the occasional, like, Democrat turned independent or really conservative Democrat buying in. I mean, Simon Rosenberg is like, we should just treat them. I heard him say, I just think the whole thing is such a sham, and we should treat them as laughable as they really are. They have given no statistical analysis whereby they can win, and they're anything other than a spoiler. And, they should be laughed out of strategic political circles, which I can see some value to, but I don't know. Like, what do you do about this potential spoiler? Like,
yeah. Just traditionally, the Libertarian Party has been more effective spoiler than anything on the left. I mean, the Libertarians had bailed us out so many times that that I always root for those guys. But what do we do about them? I actually do think it's a joke. It's really interesting. This Monmouth poll actually had a question. They had the sort of top lines on Joe Manchin, right? And it was like, it was Biden by 7. It's like 37 Biden, 30% Trump, and like 16% Joe Manchin. But then they asked, if you vote third party, this could throw the election to Trump. And the numbers were like 10-point swing towards Joe Biden. Like, I think people are happy to consider third party as long as they don't think that Donald Trump is going to win re-election. That is the most powerful focus. And I also think that Democrats don't like to be rat fucked. And so one of the things that has really hurt RFK has been the argument that he's funded by conservatives, right? I mean, he had his little boomlet, and then everybody said, like, he's getting funded by Steve Bannon and Republicans, and then, like, he cratered. Like, that was that. Like, we never heard from him again. And he's off doing his thing on conservative media, right? But I don't think anybody's
doing
thinking
push-ups
about him. Yeah, and
shirtless push-ups. That was something I'll never unsee. I'm like, oh, really?
So
did I have to see that?
If no labels, the argument would just be, for our side, would be like, this is Harlan Crow, and they're trying to get Trump to win, and I think that dries it up. Now, what I am more afraid of, honestly, is Cornel West. And that Cornel West can be an issue. And I'm not saying he's going to get like 2% of the vote, right? Like, overall. But what if he gets 10,000 votes? What if he gets 10,000 votes in Milwaukee?
Right.
What if he
which just for those who don't know, I mean, Milwaukee is a Democrat rich city with lots of black votes, and that usually go for Democrats. And if it went for Cornel West,
not even went for him. Just a hint.
Yeah,
10,000 out of a couple 100,000 voters in the state.
Considering how close Wisconsin has been the last several cycles, that could swing it. That could swing the state toward Republicans.
Same in Pennsylvania, same in Atlanta, right? These are all states that Democrats will need the black vote, and will need a lot of the black vote to win. And they're going to be tight. And so, yeah, all he has to do is take a sliver. Mm-hmm. And Faiz, what's his last name? He was Bernie Sanders' campaign manager. He's a strong progressive, democratic socialist. Why can't I think of his last name? But anyway, he was on Meet the Press last week, and he didn't come out and say it, but he basically said that he's afraid because Cornel West was like a co-chair of the Bernie Sanders campaign, so they worked together.
Okay.
They worked together very closely, and Faiz said, like, I hope that he realizes that people are trying to take advantage of him, and he was being very diplomatic, but he was basically saying like Republicans are using him to again to play spoiler, and he's going to be, I think, on a Green Party ballot. So he's got ballot access in a way that No Labels doesn't have ballot access right now.
I mean, Jill Stein. I mean, come on. Sorry.
So yeah, so that's going to be. I'm not 100% overly worried about it, but if I'm going to worry about anything coming from a third party, I think that's where I would be going. So somebody who can take just a sliver on the margins in our most closely divided battleground states, and those are all where the black vote is critical. So
right,
yeah. So, Carrie, do you have any closing thoughts? Because I think we are out of time.
Nope, no more thoughts. I've given them all. Everything I have, all the goodness.
Thank you, Carrie, for joining me. Thanks to Walter for producing. Thanks to Paul for helping behind the scenes, and everybody thank you, viewer, listener, reader, who are part of this Daily Kos movement to save our democracy from Vivek Ramaswamy, Donald Trump, and the rest of the MAGA insurrectionists. Couldn't do it without you. So glad to
come visit our site. Come read us.
Come to Daily Kos. Please like, subscribe, tell people about the podcast, about the site, and about the work that we're doing on behalf of our democracy. Thank you so much. Love you all. Catch you next week.